Hello. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite heresy show. Well, I don't know if I'm your favorite, but you're here, maybe. So, we've been discussing a book, ironically, by David Jeremiah, who's not a heretic. It's not really fair, is it? I mean, he gets to say the things he says. He gets to say, like we talked about before, that oil, the fact that there's oil in the Middle East is somehow a fulfillment of Bible prophecy, and it signals that Jesus is coming back any minute. But I'm the heretic because Jesus said he was coming back in this generation 2,000 years ago, and I believe him. But anyway, we're just examining all the sides. So this is What in the World is Going On by David Jeremiah, published in 2008. I'm going to try to make this really quick. Honestly, I already did one take of this video and I was just so unhappy with it. So I'm trying again because this chapter, chapter 4, is titled Islamic Terrorism. So Islamic terrorism, this is the fourth sign that David Jeremiah presents as being evidence that Jesus is about to come back. I noticed that he starts this chapter on page 71, and I started flipping through looking for a Bible verse to support his thesis that the rise of Islam is a sign that Jesus is coming back soon. And I had to go all the way to page 88. So he went 17 pages. Sorry, that was hard for me to do that math in my head. 17 pages of just talking about Islam, talking about Muhammad, the history of Islam, different beliefs that Muslims have, different countries, different things going on in the world relating to Islam, without quoting any scripture to tell us what does this have to do with the end times. So finally on page 88, he mentions some scripture, and he says the rise of Islamic terror is setting the stage for the events in Ezekiel 38 and 39. So he actually talked about this in our last chapter, chapter 3, when he talked about oil. Oh no, it was the European Union, I think, is when he brought this up, because of course his third sign was the rise of the European Union signals that Jesus is about to return because of that's a coalition of nations that he believes is prophesied in Ezekiel. And he believes Russia is prophesied in the book of Ezekiel. And we talked about that, but we're going to talk about it a little more in depth today. So Ezekiel 38 and 39, he says, these chapters prophesy an invasion of Israel in the end times by a vast coalition of nations, all of whom are Islamic today, except Russia. Now remember, he believes that Russia is going to be a key player in these end times events, and he gets that from Ezekiel 38 verse 2, I believe, when he says, this is, I read the ESV Bible, but it says, Son of man, set your face towards Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach. Okay, where my Bible said chief, some Bibles say Rosh or Rosh, I think, R-O-S, and that just means chief or head. It's found many other places. I think, did Gary DeMar say like 600 places in the Old Testament that word is found? It doesn't mean Russia. Russia isn't found in 600 places in the Old Testament. It just means chief or head. But for some reason, David Jeremiah is still promoting that Russia is found in Ezekiel 38 and 39 and will play a role in the end times. And I'm the heretic. But anyway, it talks about this battle. Remember, we mentioned last time that contextually, this battle is a battle of horses and horsemen, all wielding buckler and shield and sword. And it comes against a nation of unwalled villages. That doesn't sound like Jerusalem, an unwalled village. So there's not a lot adding up here that would support his thesis that this battle of Gog and Magog from Ezekiel 38 and 39 is something in our future that's going to involve Russia and a bunch of nations coming against Jerusalem, which I think is his premise. So I just want to, as quickly as I can, talk about Gog and Magog and what I think that means and how it's already been fulfilled. So the first thing we need to do is think about this idea of Gog. Gog is, it's also called Haman Gog. Haman Gog. There's an actual place, and it's called the Valley of Haman Gog. So, who is Haman? Okay, I think everyone knows that Haman is found in the book of Esther, and I'm going to argue that the events of Ezekiel 38 and 39 deal with the events in the book of Esther, so it's going to, I think, make sense. But we're going to have to go back a little farther if we really want to figure out who this Haman is, who this Gog Magog is. So Haman was an Amalekite, and the Amalekites were descendants of Esau. So remember Jacob and Esau. Esau was the firstborn, sells his birthright to his younger brother for a bowl of soup, and then hates his brother because he regretted that he had done that. So from Esau descends Amalek, which I think was Esau's grandson, the Amalekites. Now, let's go to Egypt. So now we've gone a little forward. Jacob, he has these 12 sons, and then Joseph gets sold into slavery, and they all wind up in Egypt. But then they become persecuted by Pharaoh, and then, of course, time goes on, they're slaves, and then God raises up Moses. Moses leads the people out of Egypt. They come out of Egypt, and you know who meets them in the desert? And I'm summarizing here, so I hope I get all my details correct, but they're met by the Amalekites who come and attack them. These descendants of Esau, these were really their brothers, these were their relatives, but they came and they attacked them. And this is the story where Moses is supposed to hold his staff up, but he gets tired and they place a rock underneath him for him to sit on, and Aaron and Joshua, I think, hold his arms up, and as long as they do that, they prevail against the Amalekites, okay? Amalekites. Then later, as the Israelites, they've wandered in the desert for 40 years, all the unfaithful generation died off. Now Moses has died, and Joshua is bringing them into this new land, the promised land. And I believe it's the tribe of Asher is to take over this certain land. And it's interesting because the land of Asher, one of the cities or places was named Haman. So this is part of this Amalekite territory, I believe. So anyway, now we're going to go a little farther. And the Israelites, of course, they weren't supposed to have a king. They had judges, and then they said, no, we want a king. And God tells Samuel, fine, give them what they want. They haven't rejected you. He says, they've rejected me. They rejected God as their head, and they wanted a king. And so he gave them Saul. And he told Saul that he needed to go into battle against the Amalekites. He said, remember how they came out against you when you left Egypt, and now you are to utterly destroy them. Kill everyone, kill everything. Keep none of the spoil for yourselves. It needs to be utterly destroyed. You can read about this in 1 Samuel 15. And I think we know what happens here. Saul and the troops, they don't actually do what Samuel instructed them to do. They keep the best for themselves. They destroy everything that is weak or not good, but everything that's good they keep for themselves. All the people that are healthy and strong that they want, they keep. And also Agag, their king, the king of the Amalekites who they were supposed to kill, Saul brings back alive. Samuel confronts him and says, what is this? I think this is the passage where he says, what is this bleating of sheep? Let's see if I can find it. It's so funny. Saul is so funny. He's kind of like a little kid trying to make excuses. Let's see. He said, and Samuel said, what then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen that I hear? Saul, I thought you're telling me you killed everything, but I hear this bleating of sheep and lowing of oxen. And Saul says, oh no, actually we just kept the best, but we weren't really keeping it for ourselves. We kept it to sacrifice to the Lord, is what he tells Samuel. Well, this is not at all an excuse that Samuel or God is buying. And Samuel says to Saul, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? He says, even if this is what you wanted to do, even if I was going to believe this excuse that you're giving me, that you saved the best because you wanted to sacrifice them, isn't it better to obey than to sacrifice? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. Rebellion is the sin of divination, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry. You have rejected the word of the Lord, and he has rejected you from being king. Okay, so Saul spares Agag. Now remember, Haman in the book of Esther is an Amalekite, a descendant of this Agag, okay, this king that Saul spared. And in 1 Samuel 30, we're going to see the Amalekites again because Saul didn't completely, utterly destroy them. They end up attacking they raid David's camp, and they steal his wives and his children and all their goods. And of course, David has to go and he gets it all back and he kills a bunch of them. But they're still Amalekites because Saul didn't do what he was supposed to do when he had the opportunity to do it. And from those Amalekites, from Agag, comes Haman of the book of Esther. So let's think a little bit about this. Now, when you read the book of Esther, which you should really go do, it's gonna make a lot more sense to you because you're gonna understand why Haman hated the Jews so much. I mean, read the book of Esther and you're kind of thinking, why? What does Haman have against the Jews? Well, the Jews have been his ancestral enemy as far back as it goes, since Esau. So he he wants to get rid of the Jews. Of course, then Mordecai, who is a Jew. I mean, it's bad enough that Esther, a Jewess, becomes the queen, although I don't really think that Haman knew that she was a Jew at that time. But Mordecai was a Jew, and the king decided to honor Mordecai even above Haman. He made Haman take Mordecai through the streets on the royal horse, and Mordecai wore the king's robe, and Haman himself had to shout, "This is what the king does to the man whom he wants to honor." I mean, boy, I bet that stung. That really stung for Haman, an Amalekite, to have to do that for a Jew. Okay? Then he devises this scheme and this plot to exterminate the Jews. And of course, we know that at the last second, the plot is reversed. The Jews are allowed to defend themselves, and Haman is hung up on a pole, and he and his family are put to death. So, vengeance, right? And Esther and the Jews are saved. So, this is this battle of Gog and Magog. So, when you're reading Ezekiel 38 and 39, you can be thinking about what happened in the book of Esther. Now, that's not all there is, though, because there's a lot of typology in the Bible. And this whole book of Esther is a foreshadowing, I believe, of what was going to happen to the Jews in the first century during the lifetime of Jesus and the 40 years following. So remember, here comes Jesus on the scene, and now he is the one who the king, God, desires to honor, just like the king in Esther's day wanted to honor Mordecai. And the Jews, especially the Jewish leaders, the Jewish religious leaders, were jealous and envious. You can imagine Haman as the high priest. He wanted to be the chosen one of the king of God. He wanted all the honor and privilege for himself. And here he's supposed to bestow it on Jesus. He was jealous, right? The Jewish leaders were jealous of Jesus, and they looked for a way to kill him. But not just Jesus. It wasn't enough. Remember, they did that. In the first century, they were successful in killing Jesus. But just like Mordecai wanted to kill all the Jews, all of God's people, in the New Testament, everything's upside down. Now it's the Jews become like Haman. And the Jews want to kill all of God's people. But God's people are no longer these Jewish people by birth. They are the true Israel, the saints, the people of God that have faith in Christ. And so Haman, or in the typological fulfillment in the first century, the religious leaders are persecuting Jesus. They're persecuting the saints. They're murdering the saints because they want to have the honor. But at the end of the day, we know what happens. They get hung up on a pole. Not literally, but their kingdom comes to an end, and the saints are vindicated, because in 70 AD, Jerusalem was completely and utterly destroyed, burned with fire. The old covenant, their temple, the high priests, and all of the whole Levitical system was forever done away with. So I'm not saying that Ezekiel 38 and 39 is only about the events of the book of Esther, but I am saying that the events of the book of Esther are typological of what happened in the first century. Haman, Jewish leaders. Mordecai is like a type of Jesus. We are the bride of Christ. There's so much that you can glean from the book of Esther. But, and even when we're thinking about Haman, remember, Haman, Amalekite, and Agagite, Haman, Gog. See how this Gog, Magog, all these things, it's all kind of making sense now. It isn't about Russia, okay? It was about events before Jesus and during the life of Jesus. But let's just think about what happened when Saul was supposed to kill Agag. right? The king, the Amalekite, whom Haman was going to descend from later. Saul was supposed to kill him, and he didn't. And he says, "Oh, I just saved all these sheep for sacrifices." And the Lord said, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord?" I mean, let's think about this. In the first century, the unbelieving, unrepentant Jews, they chose sacrifice over Christ, right? They chose burnt offerings and sacrifices, the old covenant. They wouldn't come out of the old covenant. They refused to, and they wouldn't obey. Jesus said, "Believe in me," and they refused to do it. They chose their burnt offerings and sacrifices over obeying the voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. This is a total foreshadowing of the new covenant being better than the old covenant. This was going to play out again during the lifetime of Jesus. So, and then he said, "Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king." They rejected, in Saul's day, Saul rejected the word of the Lord, and so the Lord rejected Saul. In Jesus' day, the Jewish leaders rejected Jesus, and so the Lord rejected them. And in 70 AD, he destroyed them and their kingdom, and he handed it over to the saints. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't think that the rise of Islam has anything to do with prophecy, because all prophecy was fulfilled in the first century according to Jesus. Remember, he said this generation, and he also said these are the days, right? Speaking of his generation, to fulfill all that has been written. All that had been written included this prophecy of Gog and Magog. So Jesus himself said all of that had to be fulfilled in his generation. So that doesn't mean that the rise of Islam couldn't have a huge impact on our world and our nation, your nation. I mean, I remember getting a comment from a woman from Germany, which is just really neat. I mean, that someone from Germany, like, even watched part of any of a video that I made way over here in the United States and then commented. I just think that is so neat. And she said that the rise of Islam in Germany has not been good for Germany. And I'm sure if there's anyone else from Europe, I don't want to, presuppose that I have all these worldwide viewers, but, maybe you also would agree that Islam hasn't been great for your nation. But here's where David, Jeremiah, and I agree. There is a solution. And the solution is they need the love of Jesus. We need to share the love of Jesus with them. I agree. There's the thing that true Christianity has going for it over Islam. The reason I just don't think Islam could ever conquer the church, I mean, I know it can't, is because there's something special and unique about Christianity over any other religion, whether it's Islam or you're a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon or a Buddhist or an atheist or anything. The difference is that Jesus offers us a free gift. We don't have to work for it, right? It's free. All these other religions, they give you a list of things that you have to do in order to hope that you've done enough to attain the privilege of maybe being worthy to enter into eternal life. But Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life." You believe in him, you accept the gift that he gave you, and you don't have to have your own righteousness, you put on his righteousness, right? And because you love him, then your life will be full of love and light if you truly love him. But it's not about a bunch of rules and regulations. So that's how I see it anyway. Quick story. I'm doing pretty good on time here, actually. So years ago, I was asked to help with this organization that my friend leads up here in our town, and it works with refugees, really, but a lot of them are Muslim. Some of them are Buddhist, and a lot of them are like Muslims from North Africa. There's also a lot from Myanmar or Burma. I don't know what it's called now. Anyway, this was probably like 10 years ago, and she said to me, okay, can you help with this VBS that we're doing for these Muslim kids? And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, I said, just, I'll help. I'd never done this before, but she said, oh, it'll be really easy. Then, like the day before it started, she told me, yeah, okay, so I signed you up to lead the Bible lesson. I thought I was going to be helping with games or crafts or something. And I said, I've never taught a Sunday school class. I've never taught a Bible lesson. I'm just really not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable in big groups. I mean, it's really ironic that I even have this channel now, because it's not my thing to teach or to talk. But she said, oh no, it'll be really easy. I'll have it all laid out for you. Well, she sends me a picture. It's like a heart, and it says God is love. And that was supposed to be the lesson for a whole hour for like 3 different classes, 3 different age groups, all the way up to middle school. I knew that wasn't going to work. So I had to come up with my own plan. And so I decided that we would watch the movie, portions of the movie every day. This was 5 days, The Prince of Egypt. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie, The Prince of Egypt, but if you haven't, you need to go watch it, because it is so good. I mean, it's a fabulous movie. It's about Moses. It's about the Exodus. And it has Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston sing the theme song, and it's amazing. So anyway, the reason I picked that was because Muslims believe in Moses. We have this in common. So I thought it would be a good place to start. Well, we got off to a really rough start because there were these Muslim boys, like these older boys, and every time we were singing worship songs, they would be like shouting and like just being very disruptive. And I knew that they were saying something bad in Arabic. I couldn't understand what they were saying. I think it was Arabic. I don't know. I couldn't understand it. And after the first day, I kind of went home and I like looked up what they were saying. Well, basically every time that I said the name of Jesus or Jesus was in a song, they were swearing. And the word that they said basically means he's like the bottom of a shoe, which is the worst thing you could say about someone in their culture, I guess. Anyway, they got in trouble, and some of them actually got kicked out, which was good because, I mean, I was pretty intimidated. I wasn't scared of them, but I was already pretty shy and nervous, and they were really freaking me out. So anyway, but this one little boy, Mohammed, he came back and he apologized to me. And so he stayed in the class, and we would watch some of this movie every day. And like the last day, or the second to last day, we watched where the Israelites sacrificed the Passover lamb. They put the blood on their door, and then the angel of death came, and he's like a ghost, and he just kind of sucks the life out of all the firstborn of Egypt, but he passes over the houses of Israel. And then of course the next day we got to the Exodus, and they crossed the Red Sea, and it's just so amazing. You have to watch it. But so then that last day on the board, I drew a picture, a simple little diagram. You've probably seen it a million times, of like 2 mountains with like a canyon in between that's impassable. And then, one is sin and death, and the other one is everlasting life with God. And, you can't get from this mountain to that mountain. and then you draw a cross in between, and it makes a bridge, and you can get from death to life through Christ, was the point. We talked about how when Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, that was like how Jesus led us out of death and into his life. And I think they were really getting it. They were really listening. But this little Mohammed, he always, every day I'd say, does anybody have a question? And Mohammed's hand would shoot up, and Mohammed was telling me all the reasons, like Mary got pregnant by God and that's not right. And I'm like, well, no, that's not what we believe. I mean, he had so many things. And he said, no, you're wrong. Jesus just pretended to be dead on the cross. Now, the funny thing is, about a year prior to that, our pastor had actually done a sermon on different beliefs about the resurrection of Jesus. And he went over this, and he said that some people, Muslims, believe that Jesus just pretended to be dead. It's called the swoon theory. He just was swooning. And I thought that was so silly at the time. And I thought no one would ever actually believe that. But now here I am in this class, and Muhammad is telling me Jesus just pretended to be dead. Well, God had prepared me for this question a year before. And so because of what my pastor had taught me, I was able to talk to our class about how if Jesus had just been pretending and his disciples knew that he wasn't really dead and he didn't actually resurrect from the dead, he had just been pretending, do you think they would have died for him? Because we know that so many of them died defending Jesus as the risen Messiah. And I said to them, would you die? Would you be willing to die for something that is a lie? And they all said no. And then I said, but if you had been with Jesus and seen him do his miracles, and you saw him crucified on the cross and you knew he was dead, and then you saw him resurrected and you knew he was alive, would you die for him then? And Mohammed, I can't even believe this, he stood up out of his chair and he shot his hand up and he said, I would die for Jesus. I think that is probably one of the craziest things that has ever happened to me. Little Mohammed said he would die for Jesus. And I don't know what happened to him when he went home and he told his parents that he would die for Jesus. I don't think they probably liked hearing that, but I've prayed for him. I think about him sometimes, and who knows the seeds that we plant. But I don't even know, why am I telling this story? Oh, because we're talking about Islam, and the cure is Jesus. He's the cure for everything. So yeah, I don't think we need to worry about it. I think we need to be proactive and share the love of Christ. So, oh, and I'm doing so good on time. Update on my grandma. I talked to her on the phone, and she didn't even mention the Glen Hill book I gave her. So I don't think she's really into it. But she's still talking to me. She didn't disown me. So I'm thankful for that. Actually, I've been communicating with someone who I think I'm allowed, well, I don't know if I should say her name or not. Maybe she wouldn't like that, but from Northern Ireland, so you know who you are. And so sweet, and was just sharing with me that she's been pretty much disowned from her family for believing what Jesus said, which is so crazy. So it's very sad for some people, but I'm thankful that my grandma didn't shun me. But anyway, so hello everyone in Northern Ireland or wherever you're watching from. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Oh, next time, our next chapter is, I've already started it. I mean, I think I've already practically finished it. It's called Vanished Without a Trace. Vanished Without a Trace. So I guess you can put in the comment section what you think this chapter is about. And I bet most of you can guess what it's about. So this should be a really good one. Stay tuned. It's everyone's favorite topic. If I put a certain word as the title of my videos, I get like 4 or 5 times as many views just by including this one secret word. So put it in the comment section if you know what it is. All right, bye.